There we go.
Hi,
It's
everyone.
live.
We are live. Thank you for joining
Live and
us
ready to go.
at the Priestess View Show. I'm Goddess Rhonda, and of course, we have with us our beautiful Goddess Star.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you again.
And we are very, very excited to have the Grand and Glorious High Priestess, Courtney Weber Hoover.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Imbolc.
There you go.
Imbolc, everybody. All right, let's go ahead. Before we begin, we like to cast a circle of protection around us. All hail, our lords and ladies of the East, our brothers and sisters, our brother and patron, the sacred element of air. Namaste. Divine honor, love, joy, peace, and respect to thee. I charge thee, please cause a barrier of protection through all of our walls that face your direction, from corner to corner and end to end. Let peace and protection reign herein. Thank you, and so it is.
So it is, so mote it be.
So mote it be.
So let it be.
All hail, our lords and ladies of the South, my brothers and sisters, my brother and patron, the sacred element of fire. Namaste. Divine honor, love, joy, peace, and respect to thee. I charge thee, please cause a barrier of protection through all of our walls that face your direction, from corner to corner and end to end. Let peace and protection reign herein. Thank you, and so it is, so mote it be.
So it is, so mote it be. All hail, our lords and ladies of the West, our brothers and sisters, our sister and patron, the sacred element of water. Namaste. Divine honor, love, joy, peace, and respect to thee. I charge thee, please cause a barrier of protection through all of our walls that face your direction, from corner to corner and end to end. Let peace and protection reign herein. Thank you. So it is.
So mote it be.
So mote it be.
So mote it be.
All hail, our lords and ladies of the North, my brother and sisters, my sister and patron, the sacred element of earth. Namaste. Divine honor, love, joy, peace, and respect to thee. I charge thee, please cause the barrier of protection through all of our walls that face your direction, from corner to corner and end to end. Let peace and protection reign herein. Thank you, and so it is. So mote it be.
So mote it be. So it is. And we now bring down the divine white light from the sacred source of all well-being and fill our spaces with peace and protection always. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Again, this is the Priestess View, brought to you by charmbystar.com and azuametaphysical.com. And we have with us tonight our beautiful Courtney Weber Hoover, who has written the book Brigid, History, Mystery, and Magic of the Celtic Goddess.
Here it is.
Yay! Atta goddess.
There you go.
Awesome. And Star, you were going to say about her upcoming book?
Yes, and the upcoming book, Tarot for One, The Art of Reading for Yourself.
Which I can't wait to hear about. But before we get into that one, let's start off with your background, Goddess Courtney. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Well, I have a bit of a mixed up background, at least with regards to American religion. I was born in the Carolinas, and I grew up in Portland, Oregon. My mom was Southern Baptist, and my dad was Roman Catholic, and they brought my sister and I up in the Roman Catholic faith, but a lot of my earliest religious experiences were heavily influenced by Southern Baptist culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we had our childhood in the very secular, but also spiritual Portland, Oregon. So I was kind of at this three-way crossroads of different faiths. One that's heavily rooted in ritual and Catholicism, another one that's heavily rooted in more folk practices and bringing spirit into the home through Southern Baptist tradition, but then on the West Coast being influenced by people who were more in tune with spirits of the earth as opposed to a guy in the sky with a big white beard.
Right.
And somehow all these pieces came together on my 20th birthday, which was just a couple of months before 9/11. So now I've just outed my age for everybody to know. But I think somehow, I think the spirits were calling a lot of us to become engaged in this world because of the things that were about to happen to it. And I think that that was a piece of it for me was, but I can't even explain what the awakening was, except that I went out to pray to what I thought was the Christian God out in a field, and I realized that what I was actually doing was honoring Wicca, which is something I knew something about, but I didn't know exactly what it was, and it just clicked, and I felt as though my guardian spirits were like, oh, thank God, she finally figured it out. There was this of yeah, we got it. And I started taking steps one at a time, and I think a lot of us felt the call to get in touch with spirit after 9/11.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was in college, and I started seeking people who were practicing this faith. And I met my sister priestess, who introduced me to her mother, who is now my high priestess, Lady Sin, out in Portland. And we started working together. I didn't give my early years in the craft as much attention as I certainly do now. I think I still had one foot out the door. I was planning on moving to New York, where I now live, to pursue theater, and I didn't see myself still embracing this as a religion, especially living in the concrete jungle. And just before I left, there was another awakening that happened to me at a festival. And at that time, my high priestess told me that I probably needed to start priestess training, which I thought was a little crazy because I hadn't been in the craft long, and I was about to move to New York. And in my mind, what am I going to do with being a priestess out of New York City? Which is, considering that's the majority of what I've done here in New York City, it makes me laugh. I think that this city was crying out for healing. And I think that it started drawing people in from different parts of the country with the intention of them doing this work. Because I know I wasn't the only one who moved to New York between 2001 2006, those 5 years after the catastrophe. And that's when I got here, I didn't notice a lot of the pagan community. Star, I know your group was probably doing work at that time, but I had a hard time finding people. And I found other people who were having a hard time finding people. And so we all started getting together and doing things, having circles, honoring the Sabbats. And in time, we found out that there were other groups just like us who were new and didn't know who to talk to. And so they were just trying to figure it out as they went along. And so we became friends. And over the years, these different groups have been going to each other's circles and rituals for a good 10 years now. We've really built a really beautiful community. Charmed by Stars done an immense gift to the community by holding Witch Fest every year, which is a great time to connect with other people. And we also have Pagan Pride here in New York City. So I feel like there's been a real gift for me in getting to be part of what I feel is a real renaissance of witchcraft and Wicca, pagan, all kinds of paganism here in the city. So my work tends to be more folk-oriented and ecstatic. Our rituals involve a lot of drums, a lot of dancing, a lot of trance work. And my personal practice is very creative. And I use a lot of materials that I have around the house. I don't apply a lot of formal structure to the way I practice witchcraft. And and I feel that a lot of what I like to do is magic through writing, because I feel like the spirit really moves with me when I'm able to put words on paper. So it's part of how this came to be.
Way cool. Wow, what a background. And did you
Thank
ever, just as an aside, did you study theater, or did you go into the theater, or?
I majored in theater and when I was in college, and I worked in theater administration out here in New York. And I was of the mind that I might become a theater director. I
Mhm.
thought I might do some work somewhere along the line. But my first winter here in the city was so cold, and having grown up in the Pacific Northwest, I had never experienced temperatures in the single digits.
Right.
And the idea of going out and waiting in line for an audition, or even just going to a theater and having to take notes for someone and not get paid for a few years, I much preferred staying at home
Right.
in my pajamas where it was warm and doing that work there.
Right.
So I think I loved theater more when I had nothing to lose and there was a temperate climate. As soon as I had to start thinking about supporting myself with it in a climate that was not always hospitable, I didn't find it as exciting anymore.
Wow. Well, you must be a very Venus girl because you're so creative. Do you have a lot of Venus in your chart?
Do I have a lot of Venus in my chart? I would have to look. I know I have a lot of fire and a lot of air and very little water and almost no earth.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a Venus in Leo. I know that. And you know what? I need to go back to my chart and look and see where all those Venus pieces are.
Well, even the Venus in Leo, because Leo, is out there with the mane and wants attention. So that would be in along with the theater, because Venus is also the goddess of the arts. So when you combine the two of them together, the fire that wants to spread and do things with the Venus and the creativity, I could see why you're doing everything that you're doing. It's actually right in line with who you are.
Yeah. Well, I hope that's a good thing for the world.
It is a good thing for the world. I can vouch for the fact that it's a good thing for the world.
Yay.
And did we lose it looks like we lost our goddess star. All right, so then we'll just,
Disappeared.
she'll be back. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. So after you've already explained what inspired you, I guess, to witchcraft, and I totally understand that as a New Yorker myself, just to date my own self, back in the 80s, I was looking for a group or someone to hook up with, something, because we didn't even have the internet back then. If you really want to know how old I am, we didn't have that. And so all we had was your local bookstore or whatever you can get. And I just said, I really would like to commune with other people, get involved with groups. I don't know where. I lived on Long Island, and they did this. The Long Island newspaper Newsday did an article on Samhain, and they mentioned this guy that they were interviewing. And back in the olden days when they had phone books, remember phone books? He was listed in the phone book. And I just took a chance and called him, and I said, please forgive me for intruding. However, I read the article. I would love to come to your celebration if I could. And he invited me, and after that, I got my community. It was awesome. So when we ask for it, we do find it.
Right.
We do find it. So moving on. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
I was sneezing.
Oh, bless you. All right, so moving on to our next question. We have a lot of people, and I ask this really of everyone who comes on the show, for the benefit of the people who still are nervous or afraid of coming out of the broom closet. So I ask everyone to maybe give their experiences with that, to kind of help them know that even if you face opposition or whatever, it's going to be okay. Don't let that stop you. So now I'm going to extend that question to you. Did you have to face any kind of reaction, or what kind of reactions did you have to face when you came out of the broom closet?
To be totally honest, I still face them. I had this little enclave where I was in New York City, and I could live the way I wanted to without without upsetting my family, because they are very conservative and were very concerned that I'd fall into a cult, go to hell. I'm not sure what all of the list of concerns was quite long. That I'd never get a job, that I'd never meet anyone, that, that this was, I think for me it was slowly living my truth, and also just holding still and proving them wrong. There were a lot of people that were worried that I would never find a job, that no one would want to hire me if I were Wiccan. That was something I heard. Right. And I stayed steadily employed even through the recession. So
right. Wow, there you go.
I stayed steadily employed, and I said, well, that concern you just had is gone.
Right.
And there was a concern that said, well, then you're never going to meet anyone, because who wants to marry a Wiccan? Well, not only did I meet someone and marry him, he is also a Wiccan.
Oh, so there you go.
So and he's a very devoted family person. He really takes good care of his mother and his sister and nephews, and he has a very good job. I mean, all the things that someone would hope that their loved one would find in a spouse is what I found. And also, we also managed to be Wiccan and still be able to do the things that we want to do. And that I was told that I was wasting my creative energy, that I could have done so much more with myself.
Wow.
And then I got a publishing contract. And so it just, and I think what I practiced is that when I was open to answering questions, I was not open to verbal abuse.
Right.
If the conversation ever turned into, what you do is evil and I won't let you explain it to me, I said, then this conversation is over. And when you're willing to listen to me, we can reopen it.
Right. Good
and I would walk out of the room. And that usually would mean the person realized that they had hurt me. And they were like, well, no, don't go. And I said, well, when you're ready to talk about this and hear me, then we can talk about it. But until then, we cannot. And I don't want to say that my journey was easy, because it's not been easy. I also know that there are people's journeys out there that are much harder. Right. And so I don't think that any one person should try to follow another person's formula. You have to simply take the steps at a time that are reasonable for you and that are safe for you. I'm fortunate that I'm in New York City, where people don't really care what jewelry I'm wearing. They don't really care that I'm Wiccan. Yeah, I've had a couple of times people have gotten a little scary about it on the subway, but no one attacks my home, knock on wood. Not only am I an out priestess at my job, I'm encouraged to do priestess work, because I work at an interfaith seminary. So there's, I have a lot of safety, even though there are times with the people that I love the most, that this difference in religion can be difficult for them. It's not difficult for me. I won't let it be difficult for me. I embrace their religion, and they're welcome to embrace mine when they're ready, but I don't force it on them, and I don't shun theirs. And that's really the most I can do. But I do think people need to take the sensible steps that are feasible and safe for them. Nobody should put themselves in danger because of this. And I do not think that relationships with friends or family members that are otherwise nurturing and solid should be ruptured because of a difference in religion. Now, if this family member is unkind to you and harmful to you and has a hard time with you being a witch, that's a whole story. But if that's the only problem you have with members of your family, it's really important to be very sensitive and work it out, but don't shut people out because of your choice in religion. And I also put a call out to any of us that are in areas where it is safe to be out, to be out. There's a responsibility there to be out as much as we can safely, because there are people in other parts of the country that can't be out. And if we can make waves and show that we are responsible citizens, we are kind people. We may be a little weird, we might be a little different, but as a whole, we're good neighbors, we're good coworkers, we're good friends, we're good members of our communities. That will trickle down. If you buy the chocolate bars of your Christian neighbors' kids, and you say, I'd love to support your baseball team. Sure, I'll buy some of your chocolate bars.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then that Christian person's going to remember that, and they might go back to their church, and if some conversation is circling around Wicca and why it's bad, they might say, yeah, but you know what? I have this neighbor, and she has just been so nice to us and so supportive of our family. Well, then all of a sudden it makes it a little harder for people who are afraid of us to take issue with us, and that will slowly trickle into parts of the country where it's not safe. So we can't isolate ourselves just because it's comfortable. Those of us that are safe to be out have an obligation to be out, so that we can help make the world a little bit safer for the parts of the world where people can't be out.
Yes, that's really
moving off now.
No, I love what you just said, and it's really true. You know, I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico now, and here it is very safe to be whoever you are. I could tattoo a pentagram on my head. No one would even blink at me. So I'm fortunate in that way that I can wear whatever I want and no one looks at me askance. But last summer, when I traveled to New York for a Hex Fest and then to New Orleans for Witch Fest, I walked through the airport with my pentacle, and no one looked at me funny. No one looked at me strangely. No one gave me the eye. Some people looked at it like, oh, but they were fine. So I do think that we are approaching, I hate the word tolerance, because when I say tolerance, it's like you have to tolerate someone, and tolerance shouldn't come in. It just should be acceptance, I guess. I'm going to change that to acceptance. I think there is greater acceptance, but I do know it is not everywhere, because there are a lot of conservative places, and I grew up Baptist and then went into the Church of Christ, and you know, in those areas that are very small and very conservative, especially, you do have to be careful. We don't want you to get harmed or anything, but it is good, I feel, for everyone to hear the stories of what other people have been through, their advice, because there are still a lot of people in hiding, and, you know, maybe they feel justified in doing that. Maybe they are truly justified in doing that. And certainly don't want to see anyone kicked out on the street because they decided that they wanted to be a witch or a pagan, and so their family throws them out when they're a teenager or something. I think it's hardest probably when you're a teenager and you have no autonomy when you're a kid, and you're just kind of left to blow in the wind. But I do appreciate your words, and I think they were really well received, well spoken. I think it helped a lot of people, what you just said, especially about saying be safe about it, because I'm very rebellious. I'm born and raised in New York, so I'm going to be in your face anyway, and if you don't like it, that's your problem. But I do understand not everybody is in your face like that, and so I think that you bringing up the fact that we have to maintain safety, I think that was really important, because I don't think anyone else has mentioned that. I think you're the only one, actually, who said, you know, be safe before you just get out there, do things in a safe way so that you're not going to be harmed or your safety isn't compromised in any way. I think that was really helpful for you to say that, and I appreciate those words.
Thank you. I think sometimes I feel like it's a bit of a Christian carryover. And I say this with love and respect toward the Christian faith, but there are some aspects of it that can be really hard on practitioners, and ones that pick up your cross and be out in the open and be willing to be a martyr. And I even had a Catholic priest say to me that martyrdom comes at very specific times, and it shouldn't be the automatic way of things. And so I feel like, especially those of us that came from a Christian background, it's very easy for us to think, well, I need to show my faith. I need to demonstrate my faith. I need to take the abuse and take.
Right.
And I don't think that that's true. I think that the gods get it, and they don't want us to be in a position where we're injured, because we are their instruments, their vessels. We need to take care of ourselves if we're going to do their work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important, again, also make it very clear to not be ruled by fear. That's not the way to go either. So it's like, but being aware of what is sensible for you to do is very important.
Right. Do you think actually, and I know we're totally starting to get a little bit off topic, and I'll bring us back later, but you've just opened up this great conversation, so I kind of like to run with it for a minute. And I guess everyone who has the Christian, and this is by no means any smear or slight towards Christianity. Jesus Christ is my brother. I love him dearly. And I'm not in any way debasing the Christian religion, or Christ himself, I should say. I have a problem with the religion because of how it affected me, but I have absolutely no problems love and accept Jesus Christ because he has helped me through a lot of things. So I want to put that out there first. But with that being said, I think that comes into it is because if you were raised Christian and especially had the Bible beaten into you, I think there's a lot of shame that goes with that. At least for me, my biggest effect that I had was being told that I was a sinner. I was always going to be a sinner. There's really nothing I could do about it. It was just through the grace of God that I was allowed to live, basically. And as a little kid sitting in the pulpit with this big man and holding his Bible yelling that at me, that really affected my self-worth and my self-esteem. I actually had to go into kind of a Christian recovery because I just felt so lowly. And then you think, they always give the example of Christ walking through the desert, and he died for you, and he was crucified because of you, and it's all your fault. It was just, that really affected me, and I think it imprinted shame. I was so ashamed that I caused Christ this problem. I was ashamed that I was a sinner. I was ashamed of everything. And then because you're also told, witchcraft is evil and things like that, even though you're trying to embrace it because you feel that it's right, there could be a part of you that's embarrassed. Well, what are people going to think when I tell them? And I think getting out of that shame that gets put on you in that type of spirituality is the biggest thing in order to help you to go forward, because initially you might not want to go out wearing your pentacle because, oh my God, what are my mother's parents going to, what are my parents' friends going to say, or my Christian friends, are they going to shun me? What are they going to say? So even though you're embracing it, you're hiding it because there's a part of you that's ashamed. If you're afraid to get out there and show it, it's because you're ashamed. And so I think getting over the shame of it, the feeling of shame that can be imprinted upon you during through that religion can also hinder us from coming out of the closet, because often many of us do live in shame. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? Because you come from a Christian background.
I think that there's an immense amount of truth to what you're saying. And I think that shame is such a poisonous thing to our collective humanity. Feeling unworthy is one of the things that I think has led us to this socioeconomic imbalance that we have. I think it's led us to the environmental degradation that we have, because when we feel unworthy, we want to compensate for that in one way or another, whether it's with shopping, buying material things to make ourselves feel better, whether it's abusing alcohol, whether it's not eating foods that are good for us and clinging to foods that are poor for us. And sometimes it could be sometimes I think it's a way of saying, punishing ourselves. But I also think that when we feel unworthy or robbed of something at our core, and so we start to seek to value ourselves, and oftentimes that comes out in ways in which we can act really cruelly. And I think that there's a real misnomer when people think, well, I don't want to be egotistical, I don't want to have a big head, but there's a really, really giant gap between feeling worthy and feeling loved and feeling that you are innately better than others. And somehow I think that feeling innately better than others is actually overcompensating for these feelings of shame. And so all of that, the sense of entitlement, the need to put down other, to put down other races, the need to put down people who look different than you physically or mentally or emotionally handicapped. I think it all stems down from people feeling innately unworthy. And once they're full and nourished and feeling full of worth, then I don't think that they need to go buy a bunch of stuff they don't need that's made of toxic things that are depleting our resources or hurt other people. You can just be what you are. And so I think that there's a real sickness in our society right now. I had a vision not too long ago of the true meaning of the devil, and I've stayed away from thinking about the devil since I left Christianity, because I was thinking this devil doesn't exist. That's Christian, but that really doesn't make sense, because if if I do believe in goodness, goodness doesn't exist without its counterpart, which is sadness or injury.
Right.
And so the one message that I got from the spirit world was to say that whenever there is oppression, whenever there is exclusion, and wherever there is pain caused by another, that's what the devil feeds on.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw like how many of our world religions and how many of our even spiritual people in our own community are locked into that, looking for ways to fulfill themselves by excluding others or by hurting others.
Right.
And it was it's something I think that we've and I used to think that focusing on myself and making myself feel good was greedy, but the truth is that if I can just give myself 15, 20 minutes a day where I focus on loving myself, then I have the other 23 hours and how many minutes a day to love other people and to help lift up other people. And so I realized just how much there are some people that say that self-love is an act of revolution. I wish I could claim that quote, but I can't.
Right.
And that it actually, to know ourselves as being worthy creatures is truly how we can fight the kind of evil that is present, that is hurting our people and hurting our planet.
Yeah.
And
that's absolutely true.
Very much so.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to be back again.
Welcome back.
I know I have to go in and come back up, but anyways, wanted to ask you, what's the first magical thing you remember experiencing?
Gosh, I don't know whether this was real or whether this was a dream, but I think I was probably 2 or 3 years old, and I thought I could summon lightning. But I don't know that I would. I think little children, their brains haven't quite figured out what's going on, and so I remember standing in my foyer and calling out, "Lightning!" and then lightning would strike. Lightning! And so I thought that I was summoning lightning, but it might have been a dream, or it might have just been in the middle of a thunderstorm and there happened to be a lot of lightning. I don't know, but I remember thinking, "Wow, I can command lightning!" So,
it's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, but I think when I realized that the magic world was real and it wasn't just my imagination,
Right.
was about, and maybe I was 8 or 9 years old, and I realized I could talk to my deceased grandfather, and I used to just ask him to come visit me, and things would happen. When I did, I remember the first time that it happened, I missed a. Now, you ladies remember, cassette tapes and how the tape used to get wound around the back end of the inside, and you couldn't play it, and it was, if it got wound around one way, you couldn't get a pencil in to fix it. And
Right.
It was my Houston tape. It was my favorite Whitney Houston tape, and it was all twisted up.
Oh.
My goodness.
I couldn't fix it, so I left it on the kitchen counter thinking, someone's going to fix it for me. Or else maybe if I'm really nice, they'll go out and buy me a new one. I'm not sure. But I now remember sitting in the living room by myself, and all of a sudden I was really missing my grandfather, who had died a couple years before. And so I prayed and asked, if he's with me, will you send me a sign? And right then the phone rang. And I picked it up, and it was a dial tone. There was nobody there. And I'm like, oh, something's going on. And I felt the presence that he was in the room. And I didn't know what to do. And so I think eventually he realized, okay, well, she's a little nervous right now. I'll be back. And then I looked, and my Whitney Houston tape was fixed.
Wow, that's so cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It was fixed, and my dad wasn't home. My mom didn't know how to fix it. My sister didn't know how to fix it, and it was fixed. And I thought maybe we could do it because it was one of the songs on the tape was a rendition of "Jesus Loves Me," so I figured, that's how you. God let me have Whitney Houston back because she sang "Jesus Loves Me" at the end of the tape.
Oh, that is very, very cool.
Yeah.
It was pretty neat.
Inspired a lot of people.
She did, and then she really did, and then I used to make Ouija boards on the playground on the notebook paper, and we used my earring as a little marker. And so I played Ouija board on the playground with friends, and then I had dreams coming to me from the time I was a child, letting me know that God was bigger than Christianity, in the ways that they could finally let me know, and so that's why I think it's kind of building up slowly over the years. So then finally when I turned 20, it was this all right, finally, yay, let's actually get some work done now that she knows what's going on.
Right.
The epiphany.
Well, that's actually a very good segue into the next question, because in your bio, you state that on your 20th birthday, you had a powerful awakening. So would you please tell us about that, if you will?
Well, I should go back a little bit. When I was in high school, Catholic high school, I wasn't sure I wanted to be Catholic anymore, as many Catholic kids do, or kids of any religion, you start to question. And I decided I was going to be a Courtneyist, and I made it my own religion. And it meant that all paths were equal so long as they're respectful, and that fairies were real and magic was real, and God was more of an energy that united people as opposed to a guy in the sky with a beard, and reincarnation was real, and all of these, and crystals had power, and astrology was very important, and the tarot wasn't evil, and that was basically the summation of Courtneyism. And people kept giving me books on Wicca and witchcraft because they just assumed I was into it, and I just kept saying, well, I think it's very interesting, but I don't believe in the goddess, so thank you very much. Which to me now just sounds so sick. And the summer I turned 20, I went to New Hampshire to work at a summer stock theater company, and I was very, very lonely. I just couldn't fit the groove with other people. I mean, they were all very nice, but I just didn't. I felt alone a lot of the time, and so in order to fill the void of loneliness, I started spending more time with the spirit, and the spirits were my friends. And if that sounds silly, and I started spending more and more time out in the woods, and was starting to think maybe I needed to really get a formal religious path. And I thought about either getting back into Christianity and just really, really going for it and trying to make sense of it in my own way, or explore Buddhism, because I dated a guy earlier that year was Buddhist, and it seemed like it was working well for him. And then there was this Wicca stuff that other people were talking about. And when I was out in the field, I just looked up and I said, am I a witch? Is that what's going on? And then it just my skin felt alive. The whole world felt alive. It was what I expressed, that it felt like all of my spirits were celebrating because I had finally figured out where I belonged. And so I started ordering books on Wicca to be sent to me, and I was reading them backstage at the theater where I was working, and I realized that Courtneyism had been Wicca all along. There were other people out there that were practicing Courtneyism, but they called it Wicca. And so I just said, well, you know what, I'm not going to try to change the name of Wicca. I'll just go ahead and call it Wicca, even though it's Courtneyism. And that's a joke, everybody out there, before people start thinking I invented it. You know how rumors get started. It was a joke. It was a joke.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
I went.
What they don't understand, Courtney, is that there is Rhonda-ism and Star-ism. Okay, we got all the isms going on.
All the isms. Yeah.
That's right.
So that was how that happened, and then I knew that it was doing something for me as I would start to get incredibly intense psychic premonitions.
Mm-hmm.
One of which was in August of 2001. I had a dream of a city full of people who were covered in blood and dying.
Ooh.
And that there was a small group of people who had made a point to kill as many Americans as possible. And in my dream, someone went up to me and said, "If you wear this, you'll be safe." And she handed me a burqa.
Wow.
And I didn't know what a burqa was at the time. I think I'd seen pictures of them in National Geographic, but I didn't know that they came from Afghanistan. I had, of course, none of us had heard of the Taliban, and so we didn't realize that the burqa was an enforced garb that women had to wear as a result of this group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my dream, the only thing that kept me safe was the burqa, whereas there were people walking around me that were dying and didn't realize it. And I looked back later and realized all the people that I saw that were dying were people I knew who were New Yorkers.
Oh,
so there was a very clear sign, and those people fortunately did not perish in 9/11, but it was the sign there that something was going to happen to New York, and that there was, you know, a very specific thing having to do with that garb. And so when the towers fell, I realized that's what my dream had meant. And then when I learned, that's when many of us here in the United States were hearing about what it was like to live in Afghanistan for the first time. It was new to me, and and realizing that, okay, what I'd seen was true. That there is a sense of protection that women that were just like you and I had to wear that garment in order to protect themselves from the Taliban. So that was when I knew something really important was happening to me, and I wanted to get deeper, and so that's when I started. It took off that year, and you know, a couple of times I thought, well, I'm just going to try this for a year and see how it goes, and it just, you know,
right.
Was it 15 years now, 16 years now?
Yeah.
So.
It gets to you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It gets a hold of you and it doesn't let go.
That's right.
That's just because it's in there, you know. But it kind of makes me want to delve into your book, Brigid, however you pronounce it. I'm Canadian, so I still have the Brigid kind of accent with it rather than Brigid. It's hard for me to say. But anyways, Brigid, history, mystery, and magic of the Celtic goddess. And I would love to have you tell us how she first came to you. How did she come into your life?
Well, that fall, it's 2011, it's 2001, and I was just dipping my toes into Wicca, witchcraft for the first time, and the woman who's now my sister priestess she invited me to a new moon circle at her mother's house, and I showed up dressing how I thought you were supposed to dress for a witches gathering, and I wore all black, and when I showed up, all the women were in all white.
It must have been an Imbolc celebration.
It was a new moon, and they said, well, we like to wear white on the new moon because we want to shed some stuff, and white to flex things.
Okay, got it.
And I thought, oh, okay, but this isn't what I thought it was. I thought we were supposed to be, you know, wearing dark clothing and lots of makeup and jewelry and being all whatever. And I was, for the first time, I was hearing women who were much older than I was, and many others who adhered to their own standard of beauty. They didn't wear makeup like other women did. They didn't wear their hair like other women did. They weren't obsessed with kind of the fitness that a lot of other women were, and they were talking about how beautiful that they felt and how beautiful they were. And I had never heard women, period, compliment their own looks. I mean, I grew up in that you don't compliment your looks, you're supposed to deflect a compliment because you don't want to appear vain. But here were these women that were saying, I'm beautiful, and my boyfriend loves me, and he loves that I look like this, and you know, so many. I'd always been exposed to women who were trying to change their appearance and to be something that they weren't, instead of accepting who they were and loving themselves for how they were and being comfortable in their own skin. So I'd never been in an situation like that. And after the meeting, my sister priestess took me to the bathroom and she said, well, I'm going to introduce you to Brigid. And I think you two are going to get along well because you used to be Catholic and she also was a saint. And I also know that you're into theater So I think you guys are going to get along great. So she dabbed me with Brigid oil. And when I opened my eyes, I said, I think my eyes feel green. And I looked in the bathroom mirror, and my eyes were green. I don't know if people can tell. My eyes are actually blue.
Okay.
But
I can't tell, but I believe you.
Yeah, we believe you.
Yeah. Pardon?
We believe you.
Okay. They were seriously green. They were like green, green, green. And it was weird. I went, wow, what just happened? And then it was about a year later, I was taking a fiction writing course, and getting back into writing, I wrote so many stories when I was a little girl, and that was what I wanted to do. And then I got away from it and did theater for many years and thought that theater was what I wanted to do. But when it was my last term in college, and I took a fiction writing class, and I explained to people it was like being engaged to be married, as if getting my diploma for my Bachelor of Arts in Theater was a wedding, and then running into your true love who you thought was long lost.
Oh.
And that's what I felt like when I found.
Excuse me. Wow.
Right, and so I said, well, let's, but then I realized, you can have both. But I had this story I really wanted to tell, and for some reason I couldn't get it to come out. It was locked in my mind, and it was just driving me crazy. I needed to get it out, and I just couldn't seem to get the gears to turn in the pages to come. And so I just said, well, I'm gonna try this goddess Brigid that Fern's always talking about. And so I heard that she liked the color red, so I got a red candle, and I think I got some cookies or something, so I heard she liked those too. And I lit the candle in my dorm room, and I set the cookies out, and I said to Brigid, hi, it's me. We met a while ago, and I was just wondering if you could help me with this short story, because if you do, I'll write a book for you.
Wow.
Well, I envisioned that it would be a book of poetry that I wrote for her. I would stick on my altar. I still have that poetry book. I'm looking at it across the room right now. And I think I wrote a poem or two, and I never finished it. And so I wrote an apology note saying, I'm sorry, I'm just not really much of a poet, so I tried. Okay, so you can't do that with God. You can't. They don't mess around. They don't. They're like, yeah, well, you owe me a book, and since you didn't write it,
I want it now.
Right. So anyway, but the short story just came flying out of me, and I was telling people it was like watching the beginning of Star Wars. The words are basically coming out of the air at me, and I'm writing this, and it was a piece that was transformative for me. I was able to let go of some pain that I'd had for a very long time, and it really touched a lot of people that were experiencing similar pain, and it got published. I mean, your first short story never gets published, and mine got published, and it got nominated for an award, and your first short story never gets nominated for an award, but that's what happened to me in my short story.
Right.
And then after that, I couldn't write anything. I couldn't finish anything. I tried probably 4 or 5 different novels, and I never could finish those. I wrote really horrible short stories, and I knew they were horrible, but I couldn't. I couldn't get anything going. I was like, I don't understand what happened. I was a really talented writer when I was a little girl. They said I was gifted or something. I don't know. And then I had this great moment in college, and now what? What am I supposed to do? And I just went along and said, well, I'm going to. I started blogging, and I started writing about witchcraft and astrology and tarot, and I started picking up steam that way. And then, but I just couldn't get I would get so close to doing what made me happy, and then it would fade away. And so I just couldn't figure it out. But I'd forgotten about my promise to Brigid. And over the years, whenever Brigid came through someone, or whether somebody had a message to me from her, it was always the question, where is my book? Where is my book? And I forgot I was supposed to write one, and I assumed that there was some book that was locked in the basement of the Vatican library that had all the information about Brigid, and then it was my job to go to Rome and steal the book or something. No, I'm serious. I thought this is what I was supposed to do. And then one day, it was around Beltane a few years ago. I was in seminary school. Seminary wasn't working out. I was in a job that was just barely sustaining me, and that wasn't really doing it for me anymore. And then Brigid came through, the priestess, in this ritual, and she said, "Why do you think I've screwed up your life? You made me a promise and you didn't keep it." And then I remember it, and it just all came together. I'm like, oh, shoot! It didn't say shoot. It said a bunch of other things. And I was like, no! Oh, my God, I've screwed up. Oh, wow. So this was upstate. I was in upstate New York, and when I came back from upstate, I had to leave seminary because of money. And on my last day, they let me keep my library card for a year. I went to the 5th floor of a seminary library, which was like dank, dusty, and there was like one little light bulb hanging on a chain. It was library belonging. I'm not making this up. This really happened. And at the very end of that creepy floor was one book in the entire friggin' library talking about Brigid as a goddess and saint. And so I checked that thing out, and I marched downstairs, and I've been crying all day because I did not want to leave school. And so here are all of my Christian classmates wondering, why is the Wiccan crying in the library and storming out with one book under her arm? And this is all true. And that was the day I started my research and started writing this book right here. And so not only is it doing really well, I also have a second book out within a year. And this is from a woman who could not get anything published. I now have 2 books out. I blog for the Huffington Post. Huffington Post wouldn't return my calls to begin with. Now I can get in there whenever I want. I'm writing articles all the time, and I'm actually working on a novel that I actually think I'll finish this time.
Yay.
So, word to all of you wise witches, if you make a promise to a goddess, you have to keep it.
I'm not even going to say the words that I'm thinking. She's like, you owe me a book, you better put it out.
She did. I said, you have to keep it. You can't mess around. And especially when you're new at the craft, because you don't know what you're in for. And so I could have saved myself 10 years of knocking my head against walls if I just, whatever. You know what? I don't regret any of it, but it, yeah, so that's how she came to me, and I used to think, and Brigid's she's the goddess of springtime. She's a goddess of healers. She's a goddess of inspiration and bards and writing and poetry and creation. She's the goddess of midwifery, so giving birth. She's a goddess of domesticated animals, especially animals that provide food, such as sheep and cows. She's also a warrior goddess, and that's something a lot of people don't realize. And so she comes through like a warrior many times. And when I was new in Wicca, when I would meditate on Brigid, or I would pray to Brigid, or I would dream of Brigid, she often came in armor with a sword, and I didn't know why I was seeing that version of her when everybody else was seeing her as this calm hearth and home goddess who was posed very much like Rhonda here with her tea in her hand, looking so uncomfortable.
You know what?
Like the embodiment of Brigid right there, like, interesting, with this warm glow about her. And I kept seeing her as like streaked with mud, coming out with a sword in the hand. And I was like, what is wrong with me that I'm seeing her like that? No one else is. But then I found out through my research is that Brigid did go to war. She was a warrior goddess in addition to being a hearth and home goddess, because she multitasks.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's funny that you said that, because I've always believed that every goddess has a warrior goddess hidden in there, because they all do what they have to do when they're approached with certain things. So there you go.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. I'm gonna have to steal it. I will attribute to you, but I really.
It's all good. It's good. It's good.
Well, I consider the fertility goddesses to be the total package, because they represent so many things. So please tell us about her aspect as the Lady of Sacred Waters. And while you're telling us about that, please also tell us about her with Imbolc, being that that's tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I think that the best place to start with Brigid is starting with her name. And Star was pronouncing it correctly in calling her Brige or Brigid. Since this book came out, I've been calling her Brigid just because I think it's easier for many people to say. But I think that there's a lot of different ways her name can be said. Her name is called Freyd sometimes in Welsh. So or Bergantia in some areas of England. There's a lot of different ways the name is pronounced. But what I think is so important is the root of her name. The Brige part meant exalted one or the exalted lady. Mm-hmm. So in the ancient Celtic world, these people were animists, and so every living thing had a spirit. So whether it was the trees or the grass or the waters or the animals, everything had a spirit, and the spirit was often female. Mm-hmm. And so if you needed some help, with getting your cow to give birth to a calf, you might call upon the great lady of animal husbandry, with a spirit that helps animals in their time of need. Mm-hmm. And so that's why Brigid has so many diverse things, is because at one time it was really being used as to talk about the great spirit of these different areas, and then over time, as Romanization came in, as Christianity came in, it started to kind of splinter a bit, and so Brigid became this one goddess that was in charge of all these different things. Now, with regards to the sacred waters, we're so fortunate in this part of the world to have clean water, especially when we're thinking about what's happening in Flint, Michigan right now. It's really become it's a horrifying reminder to us about what happens to communities where they don't have clean water. Right. So if you imagine going back into the past a few thousand years ago, where they didn't have the kind of plumbing in many areas that we do now, clean water meant the difference between life and death when you can find it. And in Ireland, many bodies of water are very dangerous. The North Atlantic is very dangerous. Many of the rivers have a very strong undertow, and so they can be very dangerous. But in many areas of the Celtic world, I'm speaking of England and Scotland and Wales and Ireland, there was you can find natural springs or natural wells where the water is clean and drinkable, and in many cases safe to get to. Some are rather treacherous, but others are not. And so by drinking this water, people notice that their health improved, which we now know has a lot to do with sanitation and hydration. When you're hydrated and you're clean, you have a better time fighting off illnesses. Mm-hmm. But this was a time before people knew all that, and so these wells were considered magical or miraculous. And so people would pray to the Great Lady of the Wells to either help them find the water or to thank them when they found the water. And so that's how, when the Great Lady became known as Brigid the Goddess, this is why Brigid now has a patroness over the healing wells and water and the ability to heal people. So I've known, I've seen what people would call miracles happen as a result of working with Brigid and her healing waters. We've done rituals in my coven that one of them cured a pre-cancerous situation for one of our former covenanters. That's a glass of apple juice, which she then drank, and within 24 hours, and I'm not exaggerating, her body changed, and so she was able to shed pre-cancerous cells that just the before. And she went to the doctor said, you're shedding cells, and then at her next appointment they were all gone. So this was in very short order after doing this work with her. So that is how one way in which Brigid affects us is through healing. And also this period of time that we're in right now, Imbolc, could not have been more important for people in Northern and Western Europe, and presumably in the Northeast United States, where we are right now, while Star and I are experiencing an unseasonably warm winter, we only have to look back a year or two to know that this time of year is usually pretty brutal in this part of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in rural areas, this is the time of year when sheep start giving milk and start giving birth to lambs. And so in days gone by, before natural refrigeration and food preservation was taking place, this was a time of year when people who lived in colder regions had access to fresh food for the first time since, probably like late fall. So if you imagine all you've been eating are mealy apples and rotten potatoes and flimsy carrots for 6 or 8 weeks. That's all you have. Salted beef.
Right.
And then suddenly you get to have cheese. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Or rather, oh my
butter.
God.
You get to have butter on your very soft carrots and stuff like that. Like to actually have nourishing food. And so this was the beginning of springtime. The snows would start to recede a little bit. I mean, I noticed the snows change here from being kind of a cold, hard snow in late December, early January, to when we get snow in February. It tends to be softer and wetter. It doesn't last as long. And the daylight is noticeably longer now because the days grow shorter up until winter solstice, but even at that point, the nights just seem really, really long for a few weeks. But it feels like right around Imbolc, early February, it starts to feel like, okay, they actually are growing shorter. I can see it happening. And a lot of times in older Europe, women would plan their pregnancies around Imbolc. They would aim to get pregnant in May at May Day, Beltane. This is why the images of sex and fertility happen.
Big old phallic symbol.
Right, because it's for very practical reasons. Is that if you wanted to have a child, get pregnant in May if you can, because that way you can finish planting the harvest throughout the summer. You can gather the harvest through the fall because you're not so big you can't move yet. And when you get to the point where you are so big and you really can't do anything, everybody's basically sitting around the fire telling stories and waiting for. And when you give birth in early February, nourished because you're going to be able to eat cheese and drink milk, and you also have some fat on your body so that you can produce more milk yourself, and your baby has a better chance of surviving.
Right.
So this is a time of year really heavily associated with birth, and so in order to hope that all the things that were so crucial to happen to make the community survive, the sheep giving birth to live young and being able to provide milk, women could have a safe delivery and healthy babies, and that the winter would end, not too much longer, so they could start planting next year's harvest. They would pray to the great lady of springtime, so it was Brigid. So that's how Brigid became involved with this time of year, and also with helping women give birth. And now in this day and age, where parenting is not just about who's giving birth, but adopted parents or single-sex parents or single parents, anyone who wants to raise a child, I feel like Brigid really associates with them. Also, she was considered a foster mother, so she raised a lot of kids that she didn't give birth to. So I think that she really identifies with anyone who's a parent, especially parents of non-traditional families.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Oh.
That's wonderful. Wow. I would love to kind of hear a little bit about Goddess Breed's early origins. That would be really nice to hear.
Brigid's earliest origins. Well, I think that she has a very eclectic history. There's a lot of times when I go and I teach things about Brigid, I ask people, I say, who's here interested in purity and pure Celtic history? And people raise their hands, and I said, okay, well, put them down, because there's nothing purely Celtic about anything purely Celtic. The Celts, the Celts came from all over the world. They really did. There were indigenous Irish, like pre-Celtic Irish people. You know, there were many visits from the Vikings, of course, over the years, but there were also migrations after the last ice age to Western Europe, and people came from East Asia. People came from probably from the Mediterranean, and we've just recently found that there's quite a bit of influence from northern Africa. They moved up and into this part of the world, and so the Celtic world was really made up of very different tribes speaking different languages and having different religions. But over the years and the centuries, eventually they started to share their ideas of what their gods or goddesses were. And so Brigid, I've heard of I have Kemetic priestess friends who say Brigid really reminds them of some of the African goddesses, and I say, well, I'm sure she's inherited things from Africa. I have a friend who's been doing a lot of research into Mongolian shamanism, and he says, there's a goddess in this tradition that reminds me a lot of Brigid. And I said, well, I don't see why people couldn't draw elements of her from Siberia and in Mongolia to her. So I think that's another reason why she's so easily identifiable in so many parts of the world, is because she's got pieces of her from all of these places.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why I think we have this Brigid who is so very diverse, right? And so she's got, for a lot of what came to be really came from her name and being the exalted one, and the exalted one of so many different areas. And one thing that many witches and pagans lament about is the fact that when Christianity came into Ireland, by then a lot of the old pagan world had already left England and Scotland, that area, but Ireland was one of the last places in Western Europe to hold on to its indigenous roots. One of the, not the. And so Brigid worship had pretty much been the way it had been, up through 1,000 years before, because the Romans had never come in and messed with anything. And so when Christianity came through Ireland and it really became very popular, St. Brigid, because she was so powerful, really couldn't be cast aside like many of the other gods were. So they adopted her into the canon of St. Brigid. So St. Brigid is the most unsaintly saint I've ever heard about.
Yes.
She curses out the Catholic Church. She drowns the horses of greedy men. She screeches across battlefields to warn away invaders. She curses apple trees if people are mean. I mean, she just absolutely, she has no anythings to give, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
So,
That's awesome.
That's totally awesome.
Yeah.
I just love your descriptions and how you say things. I just love you. I just have to tell you that. I think you should be in the theater and do your writing.
Well, that's her thing. You know what it is? I think that you're a wonderful storyteller. You're telling the story, and everyone can actually envision as it across the screen. And I'm a movie person, as you can take a look around. It's all movies you see. Movies and books. Movies and books. Like crazy. Movies and books. But you can actually see it right in front of you as a movie screen as you tell the story for each tale. So it's awesome.
It is. It's really, you're really talented. I know you probably already know that, obviously. But
no, I have no ego left. I don't. This is all an act. I have been in publishing and in theater too long, so I every time I hear a compliment, it's like I've never heard it before. So thank you very much.
You are welcome. Now, I know that Goddess Brigid, through her own way, helped you write the book by forcing you basically to write the book for her. But what else has she personally helped you with, aside from your writing and your creativity? Has she helped you in other areas of your life?
You know, she really did, and I think that the most profound one was to break me out of a very long-standing pattern of diving headfirst into relationships, both romantic and platonic, that were really toxic and draining. And I don't know why, but I felt that I needed to throw away or push away people that were kind to me, and just really attach myself to people who were not. And it was about, gosh, it'll be 7 years this summer. I was involved in a pretty awful romantic situation, but I was determined to make it work.
Right.
And I'm only not elaborating just because of the privacy of people that were involved with the situation.
Sure, absolutely.
But it was really devastating. But at the time, but I was really trying to make this work, while at the same time I was sacrificing a lot of myself, both personally, financially, and in other ways to try to keep this relationship afloat. And it was really the wrong situation. And anyone who told me that it was wrong, I basically torched the friendship right there. So I was not willing to hear anything but yes, this would work.
Right.
And my ex and I were on the verge of moving in together and probably moving out of New York, and I was probably going to give up priestessing because I just wanted to be his girlfriend, whatever, wife thing. And then I was in Ireland, and I was going to dedicate myself to Brigid, and I was going to be her priestess. And I felt for some time that whenever I brought this issue to my altar, to my prayers, my meditations, I always felt like Brigid just bristled and didn't want to have anything to do with it. And she just, I felt like I could convince the goddess that I was right and she was wrong.
Right.
I could prove to her that I could make it work. And in the pre-ritual meditation part, when I was going to trance, I just heard Brigid screaming at me, and it was almost unintelligible, and she was so angry. And then they came and got me, and the screaming was all inside. It wasn't like I was hearing it and it was filtering in.
Right, I understand.
And then they took me into the ritual space, and then the presiding priestess launched into the same diatribe that I'd heard in my meditation and started yelling and screaming and slapping me in the face over and over and telling me I needed to stop.
Wow.
Wow.
And then she put a hand on my cheek and she says, "This will never happen to you again." And I made it through the ceremony, and then the next day I found out within 24 hours that relationship was over.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a good thing that I was in Ireland because I probably would have pulled a thing like that astronaut did, where she got in the car with astronaut slippers on. Drove across the country to see her. I mean, I you know what? We can laugh at her, but I was in that mental space where I don't know how to get astronaut diapers, so I don't think that part would have happened. But the manic car chase across the country, yeah, that could have happened, except I was in Ireland with an ocean between us, so that was helpful.
Right.
So I knew that she had a hand in this. There was no way around it. I also went out to take a walk on the bog just to let some of the pain go, and there was a giant cloud in the sky in the shape of an anvil. And one of Brigid's main tools was the anvil, so I knew that she had me on her anvil based on that cloud. And I just said, all right, this is horrible. This is the worst thing you could have possibly done, but I trust you. I just trust you that you're taking me away from something more dangerous.
Right.
And and over time, instead of me like going deeper into bitterness or anger or partying or just running and dating someone else right away, I spent some time with what happened. Right? I mean, what do they say? The best way to get over someone is getting under someone else. I didn't do that time. Yeah, I just said, you know what, I need to figure out what happened here, and I need to accept some responsibility. And I realized that I had been responsible for a lot of my own suffering over the years. And it was like this was the match to a powder keg that had been sitting around for years. And I spent a few months putting myself back together and trying to and owning up for the kind of life and love that I wanted. And that fall, I met my husband.
Wow.
And I told Brigid, I said, I know you've got someone out there for me. I'm just going to let you bring him to me wherever he is. And I met him, and I felt like it was almost like Brigid had a light on over his head, saying, "This one, don't screw this one up. Don't run away from this one. Just sit your butt down, ask the man about himself. Don't screw it up." She's like, "I worked really hard to get you two in the same room. Now, please don't screw it up." I made this conscious effort. I said, "All right, what have I learned since my initiation?" I said, I'm not gonna play games. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to chase either. I'm just going to put it on the table. Hello, I'm interested in you. I think you're pretty neat. Here's what I'm looking for right now. If that's what you're looking for too, maybe we should spend some more time together. And that worked quite well.
Awesome.
So that was 6 years ago, and we were married this past fall. So
yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. So you guys didn't know me then, but
I did. I
couldn't
actually
go
said on your Facebook page, congratulations.
No. You didn't know me when I met him.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, you didn't know me back then. Okay, you know that movie with Amy Schumer, Trainwreck?
Right.
I won't go see that movie. It's too close to home of my pre-Brigid world. I'm like, I can't watch that. So yeah, so that was a big way of how I was able to how Brigid was able to help me through some things that needed to be helped. Yeah.
Yeah, well, if she was going to help you with something, that was the thing to help you with, to get you out of that.
I know, and to end up with this really, really handsome witch priest himself. I mean, come on.
There you go.
There you go. She pointed you out and put the light bulb over his head and everything else. What else were you handed?
Don't do any of your old tricks. They never worked. They're not going to work now. So
there you go. You mentioned that you were seeing her as a warrior, and things like that. So I'd love to have you tell us about how you saw her as a warrior saint and her, historically how she was a rebel.
Well, Celtic women picked up swords and went to battle when they had to.
There you go.
A lot of Brigid's work in warfare. She would be summoned. And she would screech across the battlefield like the old Celtic goddesses of war, and that her screams would create fear and chase away the people chase away the invaders. But she also was a warrior through cunning, and so it wasn't always picking up a sword and chasing people out of town. It was tricking them. And one of her favorite stories. This is one of that came with her later as a saint, where she said she wanted a little bit of land to build her abbey. She could feed the poor and take care of women. That was her thing. And the bishop said no. And she said, well, just give me a little bit. And he said, well, I'll only give you what you can cover with your cloak, thinking, she's going to have like a little tiny square. And so she and her sisters started unfolding the cloak. And it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew until it was about to cover all of Ireland. And so at that point, the bishop's like, stop! You're going to take the entire country! And he gave her enough so that she could build her abbey. But there's also another story in which that she unraveled her entire cloak, and she took it as one single thread, and she marked out an enormous plot of land and said, well, this is mine now. My cloak's covering it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. Excuse me. I have a very strong, affinity with animals. I love animals. I really should have been a zookeeper. I really should have. That's where I would have been in my element. I just love being around them.
Definitely elephant dung? That's your thing?
Absolutely. I have no problem with that.
That's funny.
I would. If I could go back into that Jurassic Park and figure out what was wrong with that rhinoceros or whatever was laying on the ground, and if I had to dig through 20 tons of rhinoceros crap to do it, to save him, then I would go ahead and do that, because I just love animals. I just feel so close to them. And so can you please tell us about Brigid's animals and her husbandry?
She was associated with a lot of different animals, and I think much of that was due to her being an earth goddess. So earth goddesses by nature can command animals. Brigid was very much a goddess of civilization in its own way, and so of course any animals that were domesticated to a point where they could be raised on a farm would be under this blanket of civilization. And so her main animal was a cow. It was a white cow with red ears, and its milk had incredible healing powers. It was considered otherworldly, and she was said to travel around Ireland with her cow. And so one of the things that people are said to do on Imbolc night was to leave out an offering for Brigid, but also leave out an offering for her cow, and it was to be left on the windowsill. And the idea was that a poor person would probably take the food. This was kind of the intention, because Brigid was so much about giving to the poor. Brigid also cared for what they called wretched animals that were sick or weren't very good for much, and so she would take care of them and love them. And so it'd be interesting if she were a more contemporary goddess. Like if she were to come up now, she would certainly be a goddess taking care of cats and dogs, right? We live so closely with them now in ways that we didn't before.
Right. It's very sad about a lot of them.
Yeah.
But I would like to move on to your upcoming book, Tarot for One: The Art of Reading for Yourself. And I know it's true that it can be difficult to read for oneself, because I have such a hard time reading for myself, because I feel like I'm controlling the events. Whatever it is I want, I see it coming out exactly the way I want it to, and I'm like, that's not right. So I know I, for one, have a difficult time reading for myself, while some others don't. But, I want to find out, why is it that people have such a hard time reading for themselves?
For me, I think it's about perception. And I liken it in the book to the purpose of a mirror. A mirror is simply supposed to tell you if you have kale in your teeth, if you've got cat hair on your clothes. It's supposed to say there's a bobby pin sticking out of your head. The mirror does not cast judgment. We cast judgment. But the mirror does not. The mirror just tells you how things are, without whether that's good or bad. Maybe you want kale in your teeth. Maybe you want cat hair on your pants. The mirror isn't telling you that you have to get rid of the kale or the cat hair. It's telling you that it's there. And that's what the tarot does, is to say, this is what's happening to you. This is what's going to happen to you if things continue on this path. Here's how things will be different if you take a different course. They're not telling you that you're bad, or that you're stupid, or that there's something wrong with you because you're doing one thing or another. The tarot is just saying, this is what is going on. It's we ourselves that put that perception on there. That we start to, as Star said, look for things to be the way we want them to be. Or I've seen plenty of people that no matter what the tarot, they always say, oh, it says I'm screwed. Oh, it says things are bad. Oh, it says this isn't going to work. And
I know, yeah.
So Tarot for One provides a series of exercises to help us get around those traps. And one of the ways we do it is by forming a very specific relationship with our tarot deck. One of the things about tarot that most people don't know is the tarot needs to learn our personal systems of association, whereas we're always thinking we have to figure out what the tarot is trying to say. The tarot is trying to figure out what we are thinking so that it can best communicate messages to us. Because for some people, for example, in the tarot, in the Rider-Waite Tarot, the Rider-Waite Tarot is probably the most well-known tarot deck out there right now, and it's the one in which most our other tarot decks are based upon. Now, the Three of Swords in that tarot deck shows three swords through a red heart. And it doesn't always look like a really happy card. And I can't tell you how many times I looked at that card, but the last time I looked at that card, I thought of the Purple Heart Award that soldiers get when they're wounded.
Right.
And I said, this card is a badge of honor. And so, but that was because the tarot had finally gotten into my association with seeing a heart with some sort of military thing about it. It made me think of a very important award that we give to our wounded veterans. Right? So, yeah, this is so I go through a lot of different exercises people can do to really help open up their associations so the tarot can get into them, and also to give themselves permission to lean into those personal messages or those personal projections once in a while, and then let the tarot come through and provide some clarity. So we're not constantly fighting and asking ourselves, is this right, is this wrong? That we simply move forward with what we know.
Right. Okay.
I can totally dig that. I used to have a problem reading for myself because I didn't get the answers that I wanted. So I would say, oh, you must have misunderstood the question. Let me do that again so that you understand this time what I'm really looking for. And of course, you know, I realized, and I knew what I was doing was wrong. I know that was just ridiculous. But finally, when I said, you know what, whatever it says, I'm going to accept it because I really need this information. And if it's bad, then I will ask, how can I resolve this so that that doesn't happen? And once I made the agreement to accept what the cards told me, they have really helped me a lot to figure my way out of things, or if I should pursue an enterprise or should I not do it, what priority should I do it in. So in your book, how do you teach people how to get out of their own way of, you know, when they're reading the card and they're trying to not interpret it from an emotional standpoint of what we want to happen? How do you help them to get out of their own?
Yeah, we talk about when is it appropriate to do your own tarot reading, and I make this very clear. This does not mean that you have to have a certain level of experience before you read your own tarot. I was working with a group over the weekend, and one woman said, well, I don't know if I'm qualified to read my own cards. I said, of course you are. It's your life. Who is more qualified than you to see what's going on in your life? But what it means is that you need to know when it's good for you to do a reading and when it's not. When you're in a flood of tears because you're so worried about something, it is not the time to consult the tarot because you're not ready to hear it or see what it has to say. It's also difficult to get a good reading when you're really attached to an outcome. When you really want something to go one specific way and you are not willing to entertain that that the situation could go another way and still be very productive, then it's harder for you to really get a good reading. And there's a number of very hands-on practices that I list within the book that would be helpful for people who are trying to learn how to get away from their own projections.
Right.
So, and it should be out sometime this fall, so I really hope people that are interested in tarot reading for themselves give the book a shot. Let me know what you think.
Oh, that's
I think
awesome.
that, yeah.
I think I can't wait. I can't wait to see what it says, because I tell you, I hate having that everything I want, it comes out that way, and I'm like, no, I know that's wrong. It's got to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I start doubting it because I'm like, I'm always making it I want it to happen. It's almost like I'm controlling it, you know, so I can't wait to read it.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to refer it because I get a lot of people that are like, I can't read my own cards. So at least I'll be able to give them a resource, because that is a very big deal. You've got really
Big part, yeah.
talented readers out there. But when it comes to trying figuring out and navigating their own life or creating a map, they're all thumbs. They can't seem to do it. So I really think that's a huge contribution that you're making with this book. It's going to help tons of people with it.
Yeah.
You know, in fact,
and I think it's something that it's a topic that has not really been hit upon very often. So I think that's
not,
you know,
not at all.
Yeah.
And you know, tell me when it gets published. Shoot me a little message, because I do readings out of a metaphysical store here, and they sell a lot of books, so I'll make sure they order some.
Yeah. Great.
They take a lot of my recommendations on what books to order, so I'll tell them to get yours, and they will.
Yay!
Okay. What I wanted to find out is about your book. Does it offer different types of spreads, and can you give us some examples of it, like, of what's in there?
Well, I'd rather people wait and see when they get there, but I do have about a dozen or perhaps a few more original spreads. I include how you can figure out yes or no for yes or no questions, which can be difficult in the tarot. I include seasonal spreads. I include how your year coming up. I include relationship spreads for not only relationships for two people, but also for polyamorous relationships. If someone is in a relationship that has more than two people in it, how that they can do tarot readings that can follow that. I also do a lot of readings. Yeah, thank you. I also do some readings in there about when you're really worried about something. And again, I do spend a lot of time in the book saying it's really important to try to have a calm level of presence when you approach the tarot. But there are times you may need to do a reading about something you're concerned about, and so having some practices in there to help you accept what would be the worst possible outcome, and what's the more probable outcome, and how you can deal with that. So I also go through some intense exercises on finding your own journey within that of the major arcana, and also helping you find clues within the court card. The court cards in many tarot decks are very gendered, and I was very, very thankful. A number of people from the trans and queer community really helped me devise some work and exercises to help people who don't identify as the gender they were born into, or don't identify as any gender, or identify as several genders, that they can still find elements within the court cards that in more traditional gender decks that can be applicable to them and their experiences. So that was it was a wonderful learning opportunity for me, and so I hope that it's really helpful to other people who are experiencing that.
I think it's wonderful that you have included people of all different types and genders and everything, so that they can feel included. But that also says New York, for what it is, it's like it encompasses so many different types of people, and in a small area, condensedly packed. So it shows that a lot, and I'm sure everyone appreciates that.
Well, I certainly hope so. I hope that I did it justice. I think also that is a gift. You're right, of being in the city and being so close to people. But I also am encouraged. I feel like you can say what you will about the internet, but the internet has really given us a gift in being able to see into other people's worlds that live differently than we do. We can read blogs of people that are experiencing going through transition, or we can follow somebody on Twitter who is multi-gendered or not gendered at all, and so we can hear what's going on in their world. And so I think that, yes, New York City has provided that for me, but I think that the internet is providing that for all of us.
Right.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
What I really like is how you emphasize in your book how you can change your destiny despite what the cards say. It's good to explain to people that the reading isn't set in stone, but an indicator of what's likely to happen at that point in time. And, I always try to offer my clients resolutions, but a lot of times people will take, oh no, it's this card, and I'm doomed. And that's not necessarily the case. So I really think it's great that you stress that. I think what you're saying is brilliant. Everything that you've done is different, it's new, it's fresh, and it's brilliant. And I can't wait to read it myself.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
You are welcome. Now, you see, already we're running out of time. It amazes me how quickly time goes, especially when we have
Wow, I didn't even see that. The time is just like, what the hell?
So, can you please tell us about your coven, Novices of the Old Ways, a progressive Wiccan and Pagan group based in New York City and Portland, Oregon, and the Lunar Coven that you head up, and the types of work that you do.
Yes, we started out as, we called ourselves a ragtag group of pagans that got together, and eventually we formed into a formal coven. We had a sister group going for a while out in Portland that I think they've kind of taken a bit of a sabbatical right now. But what our mission is to provide magical experiences in a progressive context. We also firmly believe in personal development through magical exploration. We believe in the techniques of magic and honing and developing your unique tools to be able to work with the gods and the spirits around you. And we actually have a working sister group right now in Indiana. So I have been running this coven for about 8 years. Actually, 8 years tonight was the first time we all got together. And the coven meets about twice a month, and we hold open Sabbats for the community about 6 times a year. 2 of our Sabbats are private. So you can find us on Witchbox or on Facebook. And then so if you're in the Midwest, you can look up the Novices of the Old Ways Midwest and the Coven of the Alchemical Crossroads, who are doing similar work outside Indianapolis.
That's awesome. I wanted to talk a little bit about your work as a priestess. I mean, we're all priestesses, and as such, we face a lot of challenges. So if you can tell us a little bit about the challenges that you have had to face as a priestess. And maybe some of it kind of coincides with some of the things we've had to face with.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've, pagan priestesshood is so tough. We're learning on the job. With the exception of, say, Cherry Hill Seminary or some other training programs, we simply just don't have the kind of equipping that our mainstream counterparts have. Part of it's because we don't have the kind of theologies that they do, so we don't need to spend 3 years learning it. But we also don't have, what many people that are going to become priests or rabbis go through clinical pastoral education, so they really learn how to be rabbis or pastors on the job and how to help people who are in emotional crisis and help people that are in psychological crisis, that sort of thing. And we really just have to figure that out. And I finally have learned that priestesshood is like jazz. You just have to make it up as you go along and pretend you know what you're doing. It's helpful to have as much, as much information as you can. So if you were a jazz musician, perhaps you want to be able to play as many instruments as you could. Whereas in priestesshood, you just want to make sure that you have the number of someone you can call in case there's someone who's in need of psychiatric help, that you know where the local food pantry is in case somebody needs it, that you can help somebody so there's a bunch of crisis things you better have already, and having good interpersonal skills and basic conflict management or resolution skills is so important, because I think that the toughest part of priestessing are the interpersonal relationships. They can be very working in a coven is demanding. You're going to be working alongside people that you may not care to associate with outside of a coven. They may come from a drastically different background than you do. They may be drastically different in age. And what brings you together is the fact that you're like-minded when it comes to magic and religion, but you're not necessarily like in any other ways. And so as you work in a coven, your barriers start to break down a little bit. You start to become more vulnerable, and sometimes people can rub against each other in a way that's not comfortable. And I don't mean that in any sort of way except for personalities. And so having to approach situations with compassion but also education. If 2 people aren't getting along and their feelings are hurt and one's ready to storm off and leave the coven altogether because of what the other person said, it's really important that you can help them both see through to the other side without causing further injury to each other. Hope that made sense.
No, it did. It absolutely.
It did. And it covers a lot. Yet at the same time, we all know that it's there's so much. You kind of take a deep breath and you kind of just deal, as it comes at you, and hope that you're handling it the best that you can. And unfortunately, everyone thinks that you have all the answers all the time, every minute of the day or night, and you don't. And
when you don't, it's such a sometimes people can view it as a kind of betrayal. So it's really important, I think, for priestesses in the beginning to don't set yourself up on a pedestal. Don't set yourself up as someone who has all the answers. I actually just wrote an essay for the Pagan Leadership Anthology, which is just coming out from a Mannion Press, and I called it "The Day Guacamole Saved My Priestesshood," because the early days of my priestesshood, I really believed that I could solve everyone's problems and plan the ritual and prepare all the food and take phone calls on my lunch break at work if people were having a bad day and proofread coveners' resumes and teach classes and do this and all of this stuff because I felt indebted in a way. I was their leader, and that was such a powerful position. I felt like I needed to earn it. I don't know what my deal was, but over the years I got burned out, and I'd set up a dynamic where people came to me for everything. And I think the day that it snapped was that a covener came to me at a party and complained that the guacamole was gone, and it wasn't my party, and I didn't make the guacamole. But they brought it to me. They wanted me to know that someone else ate the rest of the guacamole, and I went, okay, this is out of control. The guacamole incident led me to start making some changes, and I went to my coven and I said, you guys, this is my fault. I need you to understand. I'm not blaming you. I have led you to believe that I can be responsible for everything, and I can't. And so going forward, we have to make some changes, because if you guys come to me wanting guacamole again, I'm going to break down and turn into an avocado and let you smash me. And I can't turn into an avocado. I physically don't have the capability. And so there's going to be a lot of disappointment. And so I just had to, so I actually wrote an email to my coven with my job description, same way that I would for applying for a job, and listed the things I was responsible for. And those things included creating educational, safe magic space for our private work,
Right.
Facilitating, our open Sabbaths, maintaining safe space online for our groups, and being available to you each for counsel as necessary. Those were my jobs. But then I listed a whole bunch of other jobs that I was not responsible for. It's like, not responsible for your party. So if someone doesn't RSVP for your party, don't call me. I'm not responsible for getting you to the festival. If I'm renting a car, you can ride with me, but I can't. If I'm not figuring out your ride, I'm not getting you the train schedule. You can't go to a public. If you go to a public witchcraft gathering and someone takes your picture, don't come to me. It's not my gathering.
Right.
So, and that was becoming an issue in the broader New York community, because I had stepped up and helped everyone when I needed. I remember I went to an expo once, and the leader came over and was asking me questions about the space, and I said, I don't know, you're running this one. And they said, but you work here, right? I said, no, I don't work here. And they said, but you've been here before. I said, I've never been in this room in my life. I can't help you. I've never once been on the New York Pagan Pride board, and I usually get a bunch of vendor applications every year, and I just say, guys, I can't. I don't do. I love Pagan Pride, but I don't run it, and so and that is absolutely 100% my doing to myself. It's not anyone's fault but mine. But I set up this premise that I would take care of everything that came my way, and so naturally people assumed that I would do that because I led them to believe I could, and I simply can't. So if there's anything I could encourage young or new priests or priestesses to do, is write out your job description. As boring as that sounds, it will save you so much trouble. Make it really clear what you are responsible for, and so that there's no disappointment if someone thinks that you should be responsible for something else when you're not.
Right.
That is true. That is true.
It is.
But I have to say that even despite you do that, people still lay things at your feet anyways, and they still blame you for what when it doesn't have the guacamole or anything else like that. And then
Well,
you
I
try
think
as best as you can.
well, I think what it's really important to do then is not to take that personally,
No,
um,
absolutely not.
because it is really hard. It's really painful, and I'll never forget. I got a really I've had a couple of people in the broader community send me some really hateful emails because they felt I should have done something for them that really wasn't my place to do it, or my responsibility. And I was sad and I was hurt at first, but then I realized that they were really the ones suffering if they were under the assumption that somebody else was going to come in and do these things for them without having that agreement in place. Now, if I'd agreed to do it and then let them down, that's something completely different. But with no agreement whatsoever, and they assumed that, they set themselves up for disappointment. That's not my fault.
Right.
And so, I go and tend to my hurt feelings. Go say to my coven, "Can you believe I said that?" And they're like, "That's ridiculous. You're awesome, and that was wrong." I'm like, "Thanks, guys." But it's easier to distance yourself from it when you realize, if what's going on with that person that makes them want to blame someone else for their suffering.
Right.
That's a much sadder person than I am saddened by a few choice words. And I'm not saying I'm good at this. I'm definitely not good at this. I know what needs to happen with it, and I try. I also try to install cabinets at my house and shelves. I know how it should be done. It doesn't mean I do it well.
Right.
So that's why I'm not allowed to use the power tools around here anymore. So.
Have you been banned from the power tools?
Pardon?
I was saying you were banned from the power tools, from your hubby's power tools.
But my husband doesn't let me use power tools because I will probably mess something up.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I could probably learn if I wanted to, but he's good at it, so I don't know why.
Why bother?
Let him do it.
Go. That's exactly right.
You gotta learn to delegate and let it happen to whoever it is that can do it better.
Right. Yeah, you know what? That's the truth.
Yeah, that's what I do. It's interesting that we've been having a lot of discussions recently about people and the whole thing about accepting responsibilities for your actions or things that you do or whatever it is without blaming everybody else. And it's interesting that you said just now that it's a shame that people tend to blame other people without accepting that responsibility. But I mean, I have no idea how else to say to people other than, and I have a tendency to, and I know some of you guys do as well, like I know Goddess Rhonda, I know you do as well, you have a tendency to where something happens and we're saying it's their fault, but then on the other hand, we turn around and say, you know what? It's my fault because I allowed you to think it.
Absolutely.
It's my fault because I allowed you to do da-da-da-da. If I had just said no from the beginning, it would not have happened. But when you say no, that's when they go on Facebook and they become your big arch enemy. It's just, it is what it is.
Those people tend to reveal themselves pretty quickly. And I remember there was a woman who was coming around my coven for a while, and she kind of rubbed some of us the wrong way. We couldn't really put our finger on it. We just, we still said, okay, that's fine. But there was something about her energy was a little militant, and so she freaked out if somebody used the gluten-free spoon in the pasta dish, and I went, you could just wash it.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, that works. You could label it, if your sensitivity is so much that it can't even be in the pasta, you might have thought about labeling it and saying, no gluten on this spoon, but you didn't do that, so I don't know what to tell you. So she was very aggressive, and eventually she went on this. I made a stupid joke on Facebook, and it's taken me a while to get out of the crass performer world and into the priestess world. But I was having a crass performer moment on Facebook and said something that was probably pretty inappropriate for priestess to say. And she called me on it, which I'm glad that she did, but she called me on it with a paragraph of text, which you guys know what this looks like on Facebook, this much text.
Yes.
Yeah, it was one of those moments. It was as big as my head. And she said some pretty unkind things, and I went, well, okay. And then, about a week or two later, she wanted to know when the next ritual would be. She couldn't wait to come. And I said, I'm a little confused. You want to come, but you told me I was an elitist and a liberal snob and a bunch of other things, and that I was threatened by you. Yeah, and I went, so I said, so I'm a little confused as to why you now want to come to a circle of mine after you called me all this stuff publicly. Oh, she was the maddest thing. And so I ended up getting this really, really long email about, how she wanted to discuss it with me, and I honestly didn't have time to talk to her. I was in school at the time, and I was working full-time. I did not want to dedicate an hour to talking to this woman. I had already decided I really didn't want her around. And so I just let it go. And eventually I saw her pop up in another group. And I didn't feel this woman was a dangerous person. If I felt that she was a sexual predator or she was a thief, I would have said something to the main organizer. But I thought, there's always the possibility that she and I just didn't get along, but that she's going to find someone else to work with and she's going to be great for them. So I'm just not going to say anything. So I didn't say a word. And about a year later, she went after the leader of that group in the same way she went after me.
Wow.
And I went, okay, so it's not me now. And this person was as baffled as I was, and so I wrote to them privately, and I said, hey, I didn't say anything because I thought maybe she was getting along better with your group, but I don't think she's a dangerous person. But just so you know, I had the exact same experience that you did. And the leader said, thank you, because I can't understand what I did wrong. I said, this is not you. This was not you. So, Star, what you're saying is you've got this person who's launching some kind of diatribe because you're not, cutting their meat for them and washing their bottles,
Right.
then it's not you, and they will reveal themselves very soon. And I think that it's really the best thing any of us can do is just to say, okay, well, I'm doing the best that I can. What are you guys doing?
Wow, and looking at the time, and wow, we just kind of go so fast.
We're just about done now. Well, I have to tell you, Goddess Courtney, you were completely awesome. I hope that you will come back to us again sometime, because we would love to have you, especially when your next book comes out. I'm really
I'll be thrilled to throw it in your face, just like I'm throwing this one in your face.
Well,
I love it.
Yeah, and we have so many more questions for her, and we didn't get to it. But it's okay. That means we'll have her back. And
yes, definitely we're bringing you back, because you really are awesome, and I love your work, and your story is just beautiful. You're really quite the goddess.
Oh, you guys are great. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. And Star, I know I'll be seeing you soon. And Rhonda, I hope that I see you soon as well. And everybody who listened was in here tonight, thank you so much for listening. And please buy my book and give me great reviews on Amazon, because that's how I sell more books.
Absolutely.
You heard it from her mouth.
Take my husband on the vacation he so definitely deserves for living with me. So, yeah.
Okay, we got it.
All right.
You all heard it from Courtney herself.
We're going to go ahead and close out our circle. Hail and farewell, our lords and ladies of the elements and the directions. We thank you so much for your kind service, and release your energy back to its source. And blessed be. Thank you so much for joining us. We won't be here next week because we have the rare occurrence of the new moon on an actual Monday. So we're going to go ahead and do ceremonies on that day, but we will see you the following week, and we look forward to that. But in the meantime, happy Imbolc. Blessings to you this week.
Imbolc.
And we should see you again soon.
Merry part. And merry meet again, everyone.
Yay!
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.